next lesson from chapter 5, lesson 3, is writing proportions. So we know that proportions are two ratios that are equal to each other. We're going to ask, how can you write a proportion that solves a problem in real life? One way to write a proportion is to use a table. So if we look at this table here, we're looking at last month versus this month. We purchased 2 ringtones last month and it cost us $6, and this month we purchased 3 ringtones, and we want to use that information to figure out how many dollars it would cost us this month. So there's two ways of doing this by looking at this table. We're either going to use columns. We know that columns go vertically, up and down, or we could use rows, and rows go horizontally, left to right. So looking at my columns, my up and down, and my up and down, I could say that I have a ratio of 2 ringtones cost me $6, and my other ratio, 3 ringtones, cost me X dollars. So notice that I did ringtones, right, RT, over dollars. If you use ringtones over dollars for the first proportion, you must have ringtones over dollars for the second one as well, and we do. All right, our proportions, the units have to match. So how would I solve this? I would look at my cross products. So to solve a proportion, we do 2 times x, which is 2x, and 6 times 3, which is 18. Now we're looking at a one-step equation where we're trying to solve for a multiplication problem because it says 2 times x. The inverse of multiplying would be to divide by 2. If I divide by 2 on that side, I need to come over here and divide by 2 as well. 2 divided by 2. Sorry, I'm just going to move everything down. 2 divided by 2 leaves me with x by itself. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 18 divided by 2 would leave me with 9. Since 9 is going on the bottom down there, we're talking money on the bottom, so this would be $9. So 2 ringtones cost me $6, therefore 3 ringtones would cost me $9. Now if we want to do it using our rows, same thing, we're going to set up the proportion, but now we're going to go left to right. So now I'm going to set it up as 2 ringtones is to 3 ringtones, as $6 is to X dollars. So I have ringtone over ringtone equals money over money. Using our cross products, still have 2x, and 3 times 6, I still have 18. So notice that these guys match. Right, so yes, we set it up differently, but our cross products are still the same, which means we're going to end up with the same answer. We're going to divide by 2 on both sides to get x alone. 2 divided by 2 is 1x, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. We did money over money, so therefore, again, it's $9. You can see that you get the same answer whether you use your columns or your rows. In example 1, we're writing a proportion here. Make sure everything needs to be where it needs to be. So we've got a chef increases the amount of ingredients in a recipe to make a proportional recipe. A new recipe has 6 cups of black beans. Write a proportion that gives the number x of tomatoes in the new recipe. So we could make a table. And once we make our table, we're then going to write a proportion to help us to solve this. So in our table, we know we're talking about black beans and tomatoes. So I'm going to put them over here. Black beans, tomatoes. We've got our original recipe. And then we've got our new recipe. Right, and looking at the recipe for black bean soup, it says that we need 1 5/10 cups of black beans in the original recipe. And tomatoes, we need 1 tomato. In our new recipe, it's telling us it calls for 6 cups of black beans. Therefore, we want to figure out how many tomatoes we're going to need. So again, we could do our columns or we could do our rows. I'm going to start with columns because I like to have different units on top of each other. I could say 1 5/10 cups is to 1 tomato, as 6 cups is to how many tomatoes? We're going to look at that proportion and use our cross products to solve. So I would have 1 5/10 x equals 6 times 1 is 6. I would then if we did our cross multiplying, I'm now going to solve by dividing both sides by 1 5/10. 1 5/10 divided by 1 5/10 leaves me with x. 6 divided by 1 5/10 would leave me with 4, and we were looking at 4 tomatoes. So that's one way of writing it. We actually went a little further because we didn't even actually have to solve for x here. All they wanted us to do was write a proportion. But that's okay. Now I'm going to show you how we could do that by going via rows. So now this way. So I could say 1 5/10 cups is to 6 cups, as 1 tomato is to x tomatoes. So I've got cups over cups and tomato over tomato. Notice your cross products are still 1 5/10 x and 6. You would then divide both sides by 1 5/10 to get x alone. And 6 divided by 1 5/10 is still going to give me those 4 tomatoes that we're looking for. The next question, write a different proportion that gives the number of x tomatoes in the new recipe. So I actually gave you both of them. Write a proportion that gives you the amount y of water in the new recipe. So you're going to look at number 2 here. See if you can come up with a proportion based on what you already know. You guys already know that we have 1 1/2 cups of black beans to 1 tomato, and you can use that information to figure out how much water you need based on the fact that the original recipe calls for 2 cups of water. So see if you can write a proportion, either vertically or horizontally. If you want to write a new table first, using your black beans and tomatoes, and instead of having 6 cups over here of black beans, we're looking for we're looking for water here. You're looking for water. So you can do cups of black beans over, instead of a tomato, make that tomato your water. So looking at this proportion that we need, if I know that there are 1 5/10 cups of beans, write it out for you, cups of beans, and that is our original recipe. And our new recipe calls for 6 cups of black beans. This is me going by rows. So this is original over new. What was my original amount of water that I needed? Back up here it says 2 cups of water. And I could use that information to figure out how much water I need in my new recipe. Oh, and sorry, they told us to call that y instead of x here. Alright, so again, we could do our cross products here. I got 1 5/10 y. 6 times 2 would give me 12. I'm then going to divide both sides by 1 5/10 to get my y alone. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. 12 divided by 1 5/10 would leave me with 8 cups of water that I would need. You could have also done your cups of beans over cups of water. So 1.5 is to 2 as 6 is to y. That would give you the same answer as well, depending on which way you wanted to set up, because remember we could do it vertically or horizontally based on your table if you guys created your own table. If you were creating your own table, we were stuck with black beans, but instead of using tomato, we were using water here. And the amount of water in the original guide was 2 cups, and we were looking for y here. Right, so when I set it up for you, I did it horizontally. The other way would be vertically, which would be 1.5 over 2 equals, going back to the table, 6 over y. And you can see that you would still end up with the same cross products. 1.5y equals 12, and 12 divided by 1.5 again will give you that 8 cups. So no matter which way you do it, you end up with that same answer. Excuse me, in the next part we're going to look at solving proportions using mental math. So you already know how to do it using your cross products, which is always a great way to go back to if you want. 2 times x is 2x and 8 times 3 is 24. 2x equals 24, you could solve. Or since I look here and I see that there's a relationship between 2 and 8, I could think to myself, 2 times what number equals 8? What can we multiply by 2 to get to 8? Well, I know that I multiply by 4 to get to 8. So if 2 times 4 is 8, whatever you do to the bottom of your ratio, you would have to do to your top. Well, what's 3 times 4? 3 times 4 gives me 12. Therefore, x here would be equal to 12. And I should write that out like that. Right, so you're looking for a special relationship that you can see mentally. If you can't do that mentally, again, you could always go back to your cross products. 2x equals 24. How do I get x alone? By dividing by 2 on both sides. Therefore, x equals 12. Right? But since I can see mentally that 2 times 4 is 8, I have to figure out what 3 times 4 is, and that would be 12. This one here, if I'm looking for mental math, I know that I can just move this decimal point over 1 spot to make it 25, which means I multiplied here by 10. By moving your decimal point 1 spot to the right, it's like multiplying by 10. I would do the same thing here. 1.4 times 10, you're just moving your decimal point over. Therefore, g is equal to 14. That's using, mental math. If I didn't want to use mental math, I would use my cross products. 2.5g here is equal to 1.4 times 25, which gives me 35. I then solve for g by dividing both sides by 2 and 5/10 to get g alone. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. And 35 divided by 2 and 5/10 gives me 14. So you can see you end up with the same answer. This is just for mental math clues. If you can see something that you can mentally multiply by or divide by, you could use that to help you do it a little bit quicker. So see if you can look for mental math in numbers 3, 4, and 5 and do those on your own. And also see if you can solve for number 6 on your own as well, where they want you to just write and solve a proportion to find the number f of students who are female. So pause the video, see if you can answer those 4 questions, and then come back and check your answer. In number 3, the relationship I see, how do I get from 5 to 20? You multiply by 4. Therefore, you're going to do 8 times 4 to get d equal to 32. In number 4, my relationship from 7 to 14 is to multiply by 2. So z times 2 is 10. Well, what can I multiply by 2 to get to 10? That would have to be 5. If I plug a 5 in here, 5 times 2 is 10. So it makes it true. if you did 2 times 10 by accident here and made that 20, if you plugged a 20 in here, 20 times 2 is not 10. So you can always go back and plug it in to make sure that it makes sense. So z is 5 is what you should have gotten for number 4. Here I'm going from 8 to 24, if I want to do it that way. Or I can go from 24 to 8 and say that I divided it by 3, if I want to go from left to right. So here, what do I get when I do 21 divided by 3? X equals 7. If I did it the other way, going from 8 to 24, that's you multiplying by 3. So you would have to figure out what times 3 is 21. That's like saying something times 3 equals 21. How do I get x alone there? I divide both sides by 3, and that leaves me with x equal to 7 as well. And again, you can always go back and do your cross products if you don't feel comfortable with the mental math portion. In the last one, a school has 950 students. The ratio of female students to all students is 48 to 95. So 48 to 95 represents female students to all students. Write and solve a proportion to find the number of F of students who are female. So I know that 48 out of 95 are female. I need to figure out how many females there are out of a total of 950 students. So in order to do that, I would then do my cross products. I've got 95 times F, or 95F, equal to 48 times 950, which is 45,600. To get F alone, I would then divide both sides by 95, and that would leave me with F is equal to 480. So that 480 is representing female students. We will stop there for that lesson.